Hello and welcome to another video review. This is Mortal Kombat 3 for a lot of different systems, but it was first released in arcades and later ported to home consoles, PC, that sort of thing. And what you're seeing in this video is Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3 as part of the Mortal Kombat Arcade Collection on PC, which was also available on 360 and PlayStation 3. This is the follow-up to Mortal Kombat II and was released in arcades in 1995. It was later released on home consoles, PC, all sorts of different systems over the years. And you saw alternate versions get released later on, like Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3, which came out actually a few months after normal Mortal Kombat 3 did in arcades, although the home console release was delayed. And then you saw the release of Mortal Kombat Trilogy, which was a home console only version, and that came out basically the following year. So the question becomes, why was this game so divisive? You see, when it was released, critics seemed to like it quite a bit, but it split the fan base pretty considerably. A lot of people had very high expectations going into this thing, and when they came out of it, they were like, well, what the hell is this? This isn't Mortal Kombat. This is the wrong direction. This is the end of the series. Ah! And obviously we know in hindsight that that wasn't the case. The series would have its highs and lows, and in general, MK3 is considered one of the high points. But what did it do that made it so divisive? Why was it that fans were crying heresy? Well, the first clue comes from the presentation, which is a step up from the previous game in the series in terms of visual quality. There is no denying that the quality of the visuals in Mortal Kombat 3 is superior to those in Mortal Kombat 2. Everything is sharper, the animations are smoother and more fluid, there's more detail in the environments and that sort of thing. They managed to pull off the upgrade in quality quite well. That said, they've gone for a slightly different art style. The color scheme is a bit darker, but everything actually ended up being a lot more cartoony in this than it did in previous Mortal Kombat games. You see, the previous game was pretty gruesome, actually, and you had some fatalities that were shocking even to this day to some degree, like the Kung Lao lengthwise split with his hat. That sort of thing doesn't exist in Mortal Kombat 3. The fatalities are much cheesier. There's not so much graphic, gruesome gore. Instead, they opted for things that look more zany. There's instances where if someone ends up being pulled apart and limbs fly all over the place, they'll end up with about 4 or 5 legs for some reason. Things like that just really do have a problem of taking you a bit out of the experience if you were going for something that's, gruesome. Well, no, Mortal Kombat 3 actually kinda isn't gruesome. It's goofy. But at the same time, that's not necessarily a negative thing. It's just different. Now, you know how people can be when it comes to different. That said, the sound design was pretty much the same kind of thing as MK2. The voice acting is pretty cheesy, and you can't help but find it amusing. The music is pretty well done for the most part. A lot of it isn't very memorable, but there are a few tracks here and there that you really do remember long after the fact. For me, the one that really sticks is the subway song when you're in the subway stage. That's a really catchy fighting game song. And it all fits the game pretty well. They're going for this very dark style with the whole plot, but that isn't really reflected in the visuals per se. It's reflected in the music to some degree, so they kind of balanced it out a bit, but you get these conflicting messages between the sound design and the visuals that really do have a hard time with the experience overall. Makes it seem like it has a bit of an identity crisis. But obviously what really matter here are the story and the gameplay, and the story in this actually saw a pretty huge expansion compared to what happened with MK1 to 2. You see, in this one, they ditched the fighting tournament altogether and instead went with Shao Kahn is trying to actually invade Earthrealm. And there's all of these different subplots that go on with this. Each character has their own specific motivations for being there, for doing what they're doing. And there's a fairly sizable cast of characters. You saw the introduction of quite a few characters that we had never really seen before, and we were just kind of like, well, they're cool and new, I guess, but we had all these cool characters to begin with, and some of the new characters really aren't all that great. Luckily, pretty much everybody from the previous games returns, so if you had a particular character you got attached to in those games, chances are you're going to enjoy them here too. And then there's the plot itself, which, admittedly, it's a fighting game, so you don't really expect much in the way of plot, but it is nice that they've thrown together a fairly complicated backstory to this thing. Not necessarily the actual plot in-game, but the backstory is surprisingly interesting. And this is where the series really expanded upon what was introduced before, with the whole idea of the realms and things like that. And they did a good job with giving all these characters different motivations, making each one feel unique. So what about the gameplay? Because obviously the fans aren't going to be too horribly bothered by the story. What they're really more bothered by was the gameplay. You see, the previous games in the series were simple. They had a fairly limited moveset. Each character did have special moves. They did play pretty differently. But in this game, they introduced the idea of chain combos, or predetermined combos, as in you would press a certain sequence of buttons and it would introduce a certain sequence of maneuvers. And if you tried any other combinations, it just wouldn't work. Now, this is where fans really cried foul, among other things. A lot of people really hated the combo system. I didn't mind it so much, but there are a lot of people who hate it. Because once you get into these combos, you actually can't break out of them. So if someone is stuck in a combo, they're going to take full damage from that combo, unless they manage to block beforehand. And that does get kind of annoying sometimes, but you had pretty much the same thing happen in MK1 and 2, when you would just hammer the punch button over and over and over again, and you would just keep punching, and they would still be stuck in that. So, admittedly, it's more of a issue of, oh, I just now have to learn all these combos instead of actually chaining things together the way I did before, and it's not as easy to pick up and play. Okay, fair enough. They also introduced new fatalities called animalities, where you basically just turn into an animal and annihilate your foe. I mean, you had that before with Liu Kang turning into a dragon and chomping down on his opponent, but in this particular instance, it's actually turning into this bright-colored animal and just annihilating your enemy. And you have to actually go into the mercy option in the game, where if you've won 2 rounds and it's on the finish him part of the game, then you can actually give them a small portion of your life bar, and that's called a mercy. Then you can engage the animality. Fatality moves from the previous games do return, but these new animalities were seen as just ridiculous, they were cheesy, and a lot of people felt like they just don't belong in Mortal Kombat. Honestly, I do agree with them, and I almost never see anybody even trying to pull off an animality. They are frankly pretty stupid. It was an unnecessary addition. It was something that nobody really appreciated, and when you actually got into them, they were pretty underwhelming. And the redesigned fatalities in general just failed to impress overall. Some of them are gloriously cheesy, and you can't help but like them. Others, not so much. For instance, in Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3, if you use combat codes, you can actually unlock Classic Sub-Zero. And Classic Sub-Zero comes with the Spine Rip fatality. But they censored it. That's just wrong. You don't do that. What ends up happening is he reaches up toward the enemy's head, the thing cuts to black, you hear the noises, and then it does the Sub-Zero wins fatality thing. And that's it. It's like, no, you don't do that. They at least expanded upon some stage fatalities. They have some interesting new ones, like being run over by a subway train, which is always amusing. But suffice to say, Mortal Kombat 3 was more of a hard to get into fighter than MK2 was. See, pretty much anybody can pick up MK2 and play it. You have to spend some time and effort actually playing MK3. And once you've gotten the hang of it, it's not so bad. I mean, you're going to pick one or two characters and you're going to stick with them. You pretty much did the same thing in MK2 anyway. The difference here is that each character has very specific combos that they can do, and you have to learn those combos, and that takes a while. You also have the introduction of the run button. It's not entirely necessary, it's just there. It makes things move a bit faster, but that's about it. So if you were wondering about that unbalancing the game or anything, it really doesn't. It's just there, it makes things move faster. Not that big of a deal. And here's where things get a bit dicey. Because when it comes to recommending this game, you're going to have a lot of people saying, it's heresy, it's not Mortal Kombat, it's a horrible thing, blah, blah, blah. And then you have me, and the other people who actually liked it. And we're saying, yeah, it's a different game. It's fun in its own way. It's not Mortal Kombat 2, but it's certainly not, say, MK4 or MK Deadly Alliance or anything like that. You see, Mortal Kombat 3 is still fun. It's a different kind of fighting game than MK2 was, though. A lot of people didn't like the direction it went in. A lot of people thought it was the end of the series, and we obviously know that to not be the case now. And the introduction of combos was something that stuck throughout the entire series, and people just learned to deal with it. It's not that big of a deal. The game is still Mortal Kombat. It's a cheesier Mortal Kombat, it's a less gruesome Mortal Kombat, but it's still Mortal Kombat. And I do recommend it. Just know that you're going into something that's not Mortal Kombat 2. It's not incredibly easy to pick up and play. It's not incredibly gruesome. It's corny. It doesn't really try to be anything but corny. And it kind of revels in it. And it tried something different from what MK2 did. It had its hits and misses. Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3 is certainly a much better version than plain Mortal Kombat 3 is. So if you're going to play it, I recommend at least playing that. If you can get your hands on Mortal Kombat Trilogy, you might as well play that. But Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3 is really fun to play, particularly when you're playing with friends. And it's just a fun fighting game. It's my personal favorite in the series, mostly because that's the one I spent the most time actually playing. I've gotten used to how it actually plays out. Is MK2 a better game overall? Probably. But it's worth a shot anyway. Thanks for watching.